Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first networking meeting of what we're trying to, or we're aiming to create as a community of practice around community engagement and the environment broadly. I mean, what this will look like and what will be become known as is something that I hope to shape through these meetings and with everybody. So I'm going to explain a little bit about what this means in this introduction. I also want to introduce the wider project that this is involved with. So I'll explain a little bit of engaging environments as part of my introduction. I hope to give those linked to engaging environments in this call an opportunity to wave hello and say hi. And then I'll explain a little bit about the point of a community of practice. And then it'll be over to our speakers. We have Peter Kraftl from School of Geography, Earth and Environmental Sciences, and Brendan Gara from B37 Project. Brendan has very kindly stepped in because Debbie had some work commitments and asked him to come in. So thanks a lot, Brendan, for coming in at short notice on that one. So I'll just bear with me while I get this. So this never works smoothly, even with students. Just get my screen sharing sorted out. So I'm going to share now my PowerPoint slides. And I'll go to, here we go. There we go. So just check, can we see the opening slide?
Yes.
Brilliant, thanks a lot. It's always worth checking. I'm just going to briefly introduce engaging environments. This is a shot of the engaging environments team way back when the world was very different. So this is all of us closer than 1 meter together at our kickoff meeting in September. And yeah, a lot has happened since then. I'll explain a little bit about our work and what we've been doing, but not all of it is actually very straightforward. And we've had COVID as well. So when we talk about creating spaces, building relationships, engaging with people, not actually being able to do that physically, even amongst our own team, has created some real things that has caused us to pause, rethink, and try to consider how we work in this new world, and also how we're relevant and how this can function in a post-COVID world. So engaging environments. This is a NERC-funded initiative. We're one of a couple of NERC investments in public engagement. The Engaging Environments Initiative started some time back, actually, with some consultations and then a pilot phase. And we're now in the main second phase of this, a 3-year consortium project funded by NERC. And we started off, our starting point way back when was bringing together the pilot projects in the phase 1 that came together in phase 2, bringing together storytelling, community organizing, and community-centered citizen science, bringing these concepts together through a series of communities of practice, joining into a national community of practice. Since then, we've been revisiting these aims, thinking about how these different practices blend and work together, how we can be equitable in these. And our aim for engaging environments, where we are at the minute, is to create a UK-wide platform for equitable co-inquiry between diverse communities and environmental scientists. This is sort of the headline act. That can be taken quite broadly between getting the scientists involved in the environment and the people who have a stake in the environment together, but making that equitable rather than the scientists calling all the shots, really is what we're after here. So we're aiming to create safe and engaging spaces through the local communities of practice, and this is what we're trying to set up today. This includes not just environmental scientists, actually. So we've got actually a range of input from academia here. And we've also got some diverse community groups and non-academic representatives in the room as well, which is brilliant. And what we want to do through these community practices is create spaces where we can meaningfully explore and discuss the issues and learn together about how this engagement works, rather than us sort of working this out and then telling people how it goes. We want to develop ethical principles for public leadership and a national platform for co-inquiry. So these local community practices are linked nationally through our national COP, and that's currently looks like the partnership group that meets monthly and updates each other on how things are going and shares practices going on in each of our local COPs. And various parts of our team get opportunity to take part in those as we go along. And basically we're doing this by openly sharing and advocating nationally through stories, different tools and case studies on the most widely accessible platforms we can. So we really are experimenting in different ways, and this is relevant now to everything we do, including how we meet like this, outside of work, in work, how we teach in the university. It's becoming relevant in a range of ways. So staying in touch with engaging environments, we've got a link tree, which will record things like this. So this will appear in the link tree and links to other things and events we're doing. Also on Twitter, you can follow us on Twitter, Engaging Enviro1, and it's Joyce there is the face behind the Twitter feed there. And that's the rest of the team. And just to point out, the PI of the project, Hilary. So for this reason here, Hilary's on maternity leave. So Leo was born last April. And he's in brilliant form. But in the meantime, Arun has taken over as the interim PI while Hilary's on maternity leave. She's coming back in April, and we're hoping she's going to come back to everything in good shape and lots of communities of practice ticking along quite nicely. So a community of practice is, what is it? Well, community of practice is, well, what is a community? A community is a group of people, and a community of practice, to take this definition from a Wenger trainer, it's a group of people that share a concern or a passion in something they do. And that's our domain. Okay, that's what we come together around. And in this case, there's a bit of a hook around children, families, and open space, but the wider link and the wider hook is this community engagement aspect as well. So I want to use these opportunities for discussion starters as chances to share the practice. The community that we're building here is this group, and subsequent events where we build this community. We build relationships, we discuss things, we share things. Some things are our practice, some things that we get to know each other. And it's the practice as well. So the practice of engaging, and this whole concept, it's about social learning. So it's not a case of we're the experts and we're telling you how this will work and we're calling the shots and this is what we all do. What we're trying to do here, and we're going to evolve this as these meetings go on, is create this space where we can come together around this domain as a community and share this practice. Share our experiences, our perspectives, our expertise, because it's all equal here. There are no experts that have more or less value than other expertise. And from sharing this practice, learn about how this can work and how we can do this in a much more equitable way. So basically building that knowledge together is what we're after here. So we've planned this around having some topics to start the discussions, about some discussion starters, and then we want to give time for breakout rooms, and we're going to have 4, I think, today, depending on how many more people are able to make it. And then come back for some feedback, and we'd like to report back 2 key points, and each group maybe have a question to respond to some of our talks. We'll do a very quick mini interim evaluation just to check how things are going. It's just a kind of a test the temperature of the room. And then we want to have some significant time for a more plenary open discussion where we can bring in questions a bit more even ad hoc or responding to the speakers. Perhaps if you weren't in the room you wanted to be in, we can ask further questions on there, and then wrap it up and a final evaluation, and hopefully aim to finish promptly at 12:30. So sorry, that should be 1:30. I copied and pasted Darren's typo. Finish promptly at 1:30. And then our next COP is 7th December. Look out for that. Slightly different topic, but the same idea. Okay. There we go. So I'm going to hand over now. Actually, before I do, very quickly, Holly, Sarah, Darren, would you like to say hello quickly because you're linked to Engaging Environments?
Hello.
So Holly, you're in public. You're in the public engagement team.
Yeah, that's right. So I joined UOB in June of this year, and then quite quickly got introduced to Carl and Darren. and it just fitted in really well with my own remit of trying to engage communities, particularly those who are underrepresented at the moment. So yeah, this concept of kind of engaging the public and communities with environmental issues just really resonated with me, so I've been pleased to get involved.
Thanks for that. Rob, you've been working with Earthwatch, but based in Sturchley. You've been working with Darren.
Yes, I'm the community engagement officer for the B37 Project, which is part of Earthwatch, who are one of the partners in engaging environments. So I suppose I'm representing Earthwatch today, but I could also be representing Fruit and Nut Village or Let's Grow Together, who are organisations that I'm involved in too. So I might chip in with comments around that, or I might be coming at it more from that angle.
Cool.
I'll see which hat I'm wearing.
Nice one. Sarah, you're proper Earthwatch. You've got your Earthwatch hat on all the time.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm the Senior Engagement Learning Manager within Earthwatch, and I work on a number of different projects that basically engage people in science or research in some way. So lots of experience of working with schools and with children, but also scientists and young people, as well as sort of corporates and members of the public. So I've been involved with the Engaging Environments project to kind of look at how I can take some of Earthwatch's experiences of engaging people in science and apply them within this context.
Brilliant. And Darren, you've been working with me the whole way through as well. What do you call yourself these days?
I'd just like to comment that it was my typo, so sorry, Carl. And I'm a public, in theory, I'm a public engagement fellow, but fundamentally, I was a geologist, but I've been working around community engagement with environmental science for about 2-ish, maybe 3 years now. And that involves working at the university, but also alongside Citizens UK, who are a social justice charity, so trying to understand the links between environmental and social justice in our city, but also more widely. I'm going to stop there in the interest of time, because I think we need to move.
No problem. Thanks for that, Darren. So that's introduction to who the main players are. There may be others joining us through the meeting, which is absolutely fine. If people suddenly appear in your breakout room, the little ding dong has gone off and I've assigned them to a room. Let's move on without any further ado to Peter Kraftl. I've made it possible to share your screen if you wish to, or you can just go ahead and talk if you like.
Yeah, if that's all right, I've got a few slides with some images about some of our work that I'd like to share with you. So I'll just start that.
Just to chip in, can we keep the questions to the kind of discussion, or well, obviously in the breakout rooms, but also the discussion later, just in the interest of time, just so we can kind of move on. So feel free to put your questions in the chat and I'll kind of make a record of them, but just so we don't kind of get down a different route, we'll just do questions later, if that's okay.
And Peter, I'll just keep an eye on time whilst you're talking, and I'll just send you a message when you've got about 3 minutes left. Not that it's that strict, but just so you know.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. Before I start, can I just check that you can see my slides? Brilliant, thanks, Carl. Great, so hi everyone, first of all. I'm Peter Kraftl, human geographer based in the School of Geography, Earth and Environmental Sciences at the University of Birmingham. And I've been working with children and young people on a whole range of issues for the last 20 years. And I say that straight away, not to position myself as an expert on young people, but as someone who has worked in a whole range of ways with young people. And what I want to do is to provide just a bit of a sense of the kinds of work that we do, the kinds of methods that we use, and the ways that we try to engage with young people, but also with a whole range of other stakeholders in our research and also in our policy relevant work. And I hope that that will just offer a few starting points for discussion today. So firstly, I wanted to point out, for those of you not familiar with the kind of academic debates around engagement, that when it comes to studies of children and young people, we often talk a lot about participation more than we talk about engagement. And it might be that there's an interesting discussion for us to have around the differences between those terms. But I've just sort of put a few points on the slide here, which I'll talk through very quickly in the interest of time, again, just to ask some questions that might prompt some further reflections. Firstly, the kinds of participation that we do as academics might involve children and young people participating in research. That is, that we are ostensibly listening to their voices, and beyond kind of ignoring them or speaking on their behalf. That's, if you like, the kind of most superficial way that we might engage with children and young people. But we might also involve children and young people in what we call action research, where they're much more heavily involved at the beginning of the project in helping us to define the problem, to come up with the approach, to think about the ethical issues involved, and to actually do the research with us. And very often the research that I do, we err more towards that kind of action research, where children and young people don't participate as people we consult with, but actually participate in the process of doing research. So apologies if I'm telling you things you know already, but for childhood scholars and children's rights advocates, there's a whole range of reasons for why we might do participation with children, which range from their right as part of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child to participate in decisions and issues that affect them, through to the different viewpoints they have. Quite fundamentally, children and young people experience the world in different ways, and I'm interested in that as a geographer. And we might look at that from a very simplistic view in that they're much smaller and therefore they experience the world in different ways than do adults. There's also a whole range of challenges and dangers that we might like to talk about today too. So we shouldn't always see participation as the be all and end all or the right approach to take with children. That's because on the one hand, there's sometimes a temptation to see children as a homogeneous group, to lump them all together. Whereas, of course, as we know, in terms of the work that many of us might do with young people, children are a diverse group, and we need to pay attention to those diverse voices. But there's also the issue of kind of tokenistic consultations, the power relations that are involved when adults and children meet, and the differences between trying to ensure that engagement is fun versus something that's serious, where children can see the point of doing it and it's set up in a way that they can see the outcome. So that's just a very brief sketch of some of those issues. And what I want to do is just to sort of bring this all to life with a few slides that show some images from some of our research that kind of based in these participatory approaches. So the first couple of slides relate to the work that we've been doing for the last decade on children and young people's experiences of newly built, master planned towns and cities. So over the last 20 years or so, the government and a range of developers have been building large-scale housing estates, new towns, new extensions, new suburbs. And basically, we wanted to know what children's experiences of living in those places were. So from the research side, and clearly I don't have time to talk through all of these things on the slide here, they're just to kind of whet your appetites. From the research side, we use a whole range of ways of engaging with children and young people and listening to their voices. Top left, ethnography simply means spending time with them in places, spending time in outdoor public spaces to see how they're engaging with them and what they think. And that then runs right way through using GPS, bespoke apps that we've created, and a whole range of kind of group engagement activities. But also this idea of thinking about power relations, which I mentioned earlier, flipping the relations between adults and children. So the community walks mentioned at the bottom there happen when children take us for a tour around their communities to show us what matters to them, rather than adults leading the process. But this work isn't just about finding stuff out. It's not just about research. It's also about inputting into policy and practice. So we do a lot of work with local authorities who are building these new communities, ostensibly facilitating workshops or days with schools, with youth organisations, where children and young people can come directly together with professionals, with planners, architects, policymakers, to have discussions around their priorities for the future of these places. And you can see again here, top left, a guided walk that we're doing. Quite nice to see the children there being called the event staff. It was great that we got those high-vis jackets for them. Top right was a kind of visioning exercise where children created mood boards to give us a sense of the kind of main parameters of what they'd like to see in the community. And then we were lucky enough to have some interaction with Lego, with the Lego Foundation, who sent us massive boxes of Lego, which we used to then kind of create a sense of what the children wanted to see in specific parts of these communities. Key here, and in these engagement processes, was that they were set up very carefully. So before we started, the professionals gave the children a sense of what their jobs entailed, what the parameters of their work were, and a sense of kind of what it means to build a community in terms of the finances, the planning restrictions, and so on. So that children and young people weren't just starting from a kind of blank canvas. They had a sense of how they were inputting and where and what the parameters were. And therefore came up with some really, really fantastic suggestions, which we then integrate into the sort of further processes of planning down the line. So Holly, if I just got a couple more minutes, is that okay? Thanks. So this second project is very, very different and is less about kind of outdoor places, which I know are the focus today, and more around energy, which is a kind of key issue, not only in the environmental sciences, but also in the social sciences. So I was part of a project which was all about the creation of what we called Collaboratories, collaborative laboratories for engaging children and young people in creating stories about energy, moving beyond commonplace ideas around how we, for instance, encourage children and young people to become more energy aware, to thinking in more diverse ways about energy. So we worked here with the St Paul's Community Development Trust in Balsall Heath and did a whole range of artistic activities, play-based activities, story-based activities, here with the children in the play school and the nursery. And we had them creating kind of sundials. We had them doing activities where they could use kinesthetic energy and magnetic energy, basically expanding the ways in which they think and thought about energy. We also worked with the secondary school, which works with young people who've been excluded from mainstream schools, again, to do a whole range of activities, working with the Think Tank Museum, the Lapworth Museum, taking them on guided tours around Balsall Heath, using Jenga, to basically create a whole series of often quite disjointed stories and narratives about their interactions with energy, their kind of bodily uses of energy, and kind of, again, expanding these ideas about what energy is and what it means to us as humans. So I can say lots more about both of those projects, but as I say, that was just a way of kind of whetting your appetite and giving you a bit of a sense of the kinds of work we do and how we do it.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Peter. And I think we'll keep our powder dry with discussion and questions for Peter in our plenary and in our discussion groups. We can discuss things as we go along. Shall we move on then to Brendan? Brendan, would you like to share a screen, or you?
I'll try.
Perfect.
Bear with me.
Brilliant.
Okay. Can everybody see that? Okay.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So yeah, thanks for the invitation to give this quick presentation. Basically, what I'll do is I'll have a quick talk about what the B37 project is to give you a bit of background. And then basically this is kind of our top 6 tips about engaging with communities, and especially about engaging with communities in open spaces and green spaces. So we are the B37 Project.
You've lost your screen.
Sorry?
I think you've lost your screen. It's just black at the minute.
Oh, hang on. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. It's full screen. It doesn't seem to work. Okay, so B37 relates to the postcode, which is Chelmsley Wood, which is part of North Solihull. So there's Chelmsley Wood, Kingshurst, Smiths Wood and Ford Bridge. And it's an area of quite high deprivation. There's basically a 10-year gap in life expectancy in the north compared to the rest of the Solihull borough. But even though we've had a lot of regeneration in this area, we've got a lot of green spaces. So there's a lot of natural assets in the area. B37 started back in 2016 as a grassroots community group. 2 people who came back to the area and were kind of disappointed to see what was going on and how the people were. And basically, we've sort of got a heightened sense of social injustice as to what was going on here. So we formed this group, and basically our initial aim was to support projects in art, food and the environment, because they were our kind of core kind of things we like doing. So we started with a 1-week art pop-up, and then we did 2 6-week sort of community consultation events in an empty shop unit in the local town centre. From that, we started working with Eastside Projects in Digbeth, and we also started working with Birmingham City University's Architecture School. And this was all around reimagining the landscape of North Solihull. We then formed like an environmental splinter group called Tribal, which was doing guerrilla gardening and rewilding. This, over lockdown, has kind of morphed into tribal community ranges, where we've been signposting green spaces and signposting activities people could do in their own time, rather than doing it as led events. We've also started a tribal junior ranges to try and get kids more involved and sort of get them interested in the environment at a very early age. So I think I thought we had 30 kids on it, but Debbie told me yesterday we've got 58 kids registered on this. So it's, as a pilot, it's kind of getting a little bit too big for me. And then we also, food was the last thing we started doing, and it's taken a little bit of time to get this food project together. But now we have this idea of growing food on a council estate and then selling it off with, and that's now been taken on board the Lloyds Bank Social Entrepreneurs Startup Programme with the West Midlands School for Social Entrepreneurs. So here's the first of our top tips, that you've got to have a shared vision, and I think you need to start with a handful of people in the community who have that same vision. We didn't worry too much about the direction we were taking, just that we had this kind of common purpose around art, food and the environment. Our vision, our kind of collective vision is we want to improve people's health and well-being by leveraging off the green spaces in the area. And we think that our group is very much the whole is more than the sum of its parts. We need to empower and support people. And that's about empowering the community to decide how they deliver the vision, and then we support it. So you've got to do the back office, you know, the sort of the protocols, the processes, the funding, the governance, all that kind of backroom rubbish. Do that and let the community do the magic, because that's what they want to do. We started the community rangers basically to reflect the interest of people who were starting to come into the group. Obvious, I guess, but be patient, get to know the people. I mean, it takes time to meet people, it takes time to understand their views, and especially for people starting to trust each other, it's important to not rush into these things. Families and friends, word of mouth has been probably our most important spread. And stop worrying about the numbers. Things will grow organically. We started 4 years ago having never used Facebook, and now across our 2 groups and our 4 discussion groups, so sorry, our 2 pages, we've got probably a following over 2,000 people. And they are geographically mostly within B37 and North Solihull, but we've got people from all over the world now looking at what we're doing. Be flexible and seize opportunities as they come. So be open to change. Like I said, we had common purpose. We weren't sure the direction it was going to take. I'll say it, don't be too academic in the approach. And don't be afraid to fail, but make sure that you learn. And, you know, we try to learn from all the mistakes we've made, so we know what works, what doesn't work, and we try not to repeat those things. That's how the food came about, because of lockdown, because we started a group called B37 Growing Together, and we're sharing stories about how to grow things, sharing seeds. That sort of food idea sort of crystallized because of the, you know, having to be flexible through lockdown. Yeah, okay, so don't preach, don't be a service. What I mean by that is make friends, have fun, and do good stuff. Our ethos has always been, it's not about doing good, it's about doing good stuff. And if you do good stuff, people will come on board and they'll see that this is a fun thing to do. It's a difficult one, but don't try to bug people about collecting the data. We know, and we have to do the same thing. We have to collect data, but it can turn people off all the data collection. And please, whatever, don't label people. And then finally, keep talking and listening to everyone. We've always thought the best ideas come from people who have engaged in the project, and the best advice can come from people who are independent but have an interest or share your vision. As an example, our board, because we've now become a CIC, is made up of the original 5 core members. Our steering group is much more diverse. So we have people, well, Darren's on our steering group. We have Ruth from Eastside Projects, who's the associate director there. And we have Mike Dring, who's the program director at the BCU Architecture School. And actually, we're always looking for new people to join the steering group. So if you're interested, just drop us a line. You can follow us on Facebook. That's the best place to follow us at the moment. We're working on a website. So B37 Project, Tribal Community Rangers is on Tribal B37. Thanks.